J.D. smelled which way the wind was blowing off the porta potty that is today's Republican Party, and he changed his tune. All of a sudden, he decided not only isn't Trump noxious and reprehensible, he's now the greatest president of his lifetime, and J.D.'s previous opinions, he says, were stupid.
All of us say stupid things, and I happen to say stupid things very publicly.
Which is really a great qualification for a future senator.
Late night comic Jimmy Kimmel roasting a Republican candidate for Senate in Ohio. That's J.D. Vance, who recently surged to take the lead in the polls there. Critics say he is now the embodiment of the kind of fact and value-free Republican Party which sells out its own self-professed principles in a completely embarrassing sycophancy to Trump. Now, this is a big deal right now. The Ohio primary is Tuesday, and right now we have a special look at MAGA, at this guy Vance, and where the Republican Party may be headed. Ohio is a key state, and J.D. Vance has made a key evolution. He was very concerned about Donald Trump getting any power in America. He went so far in his private rebuke of Trump that what I'm about to show you is something to start this. Come back to me for a sec. I'm just going to set this up for a second. That headline is something else, so I want to make sure we have some context. He made a private rebuke of Trump that managed to offend all at once victims of the Holocaust, any honest historian, and, of course, Donald Trump. This person, now running for the Republican primary, outlandishly likened Donald Trump's leadership to the genocidal death camps of the Nazis' Holocaust. We'll take a look at that headline again, because that's the context for what you see here. He told friends in early 2016 he thought Trump might be, quote, America's Hitler, unquote. Offensive, ridiculous, but also quite an extreme view to walk away from if you start over there. Now, knowing that was his private view, behold the tension between J.D. Vance's original Trump critique and what has become a shameless fawning as a Republican candidate.
As somebody who doesn't like Trump, myself, the elites were right about Donald Trump, right? I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
He's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country like nobody else.
I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place. I think that he was a good president. I think he made a lot of good decisions for people.
I take it you're not a Trump supporter from what I've read. Am I right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I didn't vote for Trump.
All around, he was a great president. I'm 37 years old. Certainly the best president of my lifetime.
Now, before you get to the broader conversation or even a fact check, just within the world of Republican politics, this is already leading to criticism. Take Mark Levine saying Vance is not MAGA, America First, or conservative. That's certainly the read from what he was saying there. While the Club for Growth has attacked Vance as well, a right-wing group. Vance, though, is doing something that matters. It may matter in this Ohio primary on Tuesday and matter in much larger ways, which is why we have this special report. He's trying to turn his own political weaknesses on the right into these putative assets. Now, there's more you need to know about him than just this Trump fault line. Consider how Vance's professional bio is basically a hit list for today's right-wing grievance culture. He was a coastal banker and a venture capitalist, an Ivy League elite from Yale Law School, a self-styled literary intellectual who mused about the dangers of right-wing extremism in magazines like The Atlantic. And then, I'm out of fingers on this hand, and then he pursued a perch within the coastal media elite, pushing a trendy book where he claimed to explain the Rust Belt in the Midwest while writing from the coasts, and then taking that tome, Hillbilly Elegy, to go spend as much time as he could talking to his fellow media elites about what were his coastal observations about the troubled rest of the nation. And by the way, many reporters were interested to hear him. Many actually treated him pretty fairly and largely accepted his claims at the time as honest, although now he's built a campaign trying to convince his own Ohio voters to ignore who he hung out with and what he said before.
We sat down recently with J.D. Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy.
A memoir of a family and a culture in crisis. It is a great read.
Its author, J.D. Vance, joins our discussion now. It's great to have you here at the table.
This is remarkable work you've done. You're a great writer. You're a great writer.
That wasn't that long ago, and you could see where he wanted to be. He has money and influence. He chose to put himself out there. He chose to try to be that kind of mainstream media pundit or whatever you want to call it. And he used that perch at first to warn about Trump. I'm not going to repeat the offensive comparison he made, but he also called him cultural heroin, warning that this would be a quick high that would eventually lead anyone who supported him to an eventual come down. Vance at the time clearly thought he was diagnosing others. Now it looks more like a mix of confession and projection. What may have been warnings about someone he assumed would lose now have him on the wrong side of his pursuit of power. And where now Vance is boosting Trump, funding right-wing companies like Rumble, which is used by the Bannonites and marketed to people who can't stay on YouTube. Rumble also did a partnership with Trump's Truth Social app, which has needed all the partnerships and help it can get. Vance also deleted his old tweets that slammed Trump as, quote, reprehensible, and arguing that God wants better for America than Trump. So Vance, who touted his humble origins with a lack of access to what he called social capital, now is supplying the financial capital to fund all kinds of social media companies. And, of course, he spent his time building his what he would call social capital by socializing with media elites, as he would put it. That's where the story is larger than Vance or even Tuesday's primary. Because when it comes to tech billionaire media elites, they are increasingly a Trojan horse within the far right's supposed war on tech media elites, enemies from within. We're witnessing a movement that struggles with facts and often reasoned discourse that demands more than retweetable slogans. And now this movement is increasingly unwilling or unable to figure out who is even on its side. That can be weirdly fascinating to watch or concerning for honest democracy, to see how quickly these Trumps and Musks and now Vances of the world, who, by the way, are all cosmopolitan media elites, are able to draw crowds who will then cheer on their own subjugation. Now, when Vance has been pressed on some of these associations, this admittedly very smart, educated writer has largely struggled to offer much of a logical rebuttal.
Cultural outsider. I didn't come from the elites. I didn't come from the Northeast or from San Francisco.
You are out in San Francisco now, right?
That's right.
Working for Peter Thiel?
Yeah, I work at one of the venture capital funds that he co-founded. The things that I care most about are not in San Francisco, they're not in Silicon Valley. One thing led to another, and I found myself in Silicon Valley. If you think about the folks who are really building the future, building really great and cool companies, and I just wanted to be involved in that.
He's a Yale-educated lawyer, a great student, went to Yale, got a law degree.
Now, we cannot read minds on the news, but Vance would appear to have a mind smart enough to know these are just tricks. And he already confessed what was on his mind about Donald Trump, which is how he knows he's lying when he talks about the last election being stolen.
And I do think that basic human honesty, even though it may not always pay off in the short term, it tends to pay off in the long term, or at least if you're not honest, it tends to pay off negatively in the long term.
I'm sick of the big tech companies censoring conservatives, shutting us up, and let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, stealing the 2020 election.
That false claim is what matters most to Trump. The loser of that very election, 2020, cannot change reality. Trump lost. Trump is the loser. He's not president. Everyone knows he's not president. So now he is almost wholly focused in public on a kind of make-believe. A naked emperor who gets a thrill every time new minions pretend he is clothed. A J.D. Vance or a Kevin McCarthy, they will join in their own public defenestration, shrouding this dethroned loser of the race in the very finest big lie linen. And while that might seem like an odd exercise, you have to remember, it apparently feels all the softer, all the more velvety, all the better to Trump when those minions have been forced to publicly convert in their humiliation show of his sway. The more obvious, the more powerful Trump feels, which is vital to someone who lost in public and is currently so governmentally powerless. And that's probably why Donald Trump, if you haven't seen this yet, just endorsed J.D. Vance and then went way out of his way to note Vance's criticism of Trump in that new endorsement.
Guy that said some bad about me. He's a fearless MAGA fighter. And most importantly, JD, you're supported by me.
Most importantly,